I forgot to hit the record button. This is Retrospection Radio Hour with your host, Noah.
And I am Nate, as usual.
We're going to be going over the 90s today. But before we do any of that, I have some really awesome retrospection news for everyone. First off, we have live streams that are starting out on Wednesdays, starting February 2nd. And going from there, February 2nd, February 9th, I think I got one on the 16th or 18th. Every Wednesday, I'm not very good with dates. Every Wednesday from 9 p.m. to 9:30 p.m., I'm going to have a whole bunch of random cool people on. I've got right now an author. I've got a young college student who's a very fascinating storyteller. And then I've got a father who's just got a lot of advice for other fathers out there. So this new portion of Retrospection Radio will be dealing a lot with people and what they create, and really focusing on the real people behind the artwork. The idea being, like, these people put themselves front and center. They create businesses. They go off. They become authors and podcasters. But at the core of every person is a person with a heart and a mind and a consciousness. And sometimes their stories don't get told. So I wanted to give a medium for people to hear those stories. And if any of that sounded interesting to you, honestly, go ahead, check it out. Just set your calendar for Wednesday, February 2nd, and from every week onward. If you end up listening live, that would be awesome, from 9 p.m. to 9:30. Follow Retrospection on all the socials, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all of those, to find the links and learn about dates and time. But not just that, I will be posting these episodes on Retrospection, so if you happen to miss the live stream, you'll be able to catch it there. Also, more big news for Retrospection Radio. Retrospection Radio Theater is going to be releasing the second episode of Season 4 in 3 days. That is January 31st. It's coming out at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, just in time for, you can listen to it when you wake up, on your morning commute. You can listen to it on your way back. You can listen to it during lunch. I believe this episode's about 15 minutes. This one deals with Royal McNeil goes off and he talks with John Robinson, who is a name mentioned during the first episode, the Bella Fields case. And from there, things go really, really in a left turn. They just completely do not go the way that you would expect. So it is well worth a listen. If you've not listened to the first episode yet, you should probably get that in before you listen to the second one. So tonight I'm here with Nate. This is Retrospection Radio Hour, which always goes longer than an hour, but hey, cool enough name. I did some awesome stuff for us this past week. We now have an actual image.
We have an image?
Yeah, so every Retrospection Radio thing has an image, because it's all underneath the Retrospection Radio podcast.
Yeah.
But it's called like Retrospection Radio Hour dash 1990 to 1995 or 94. Every episode is. So it's called Retrospection Radio, Retrospection Theater, or Radio Theater, or Retrospection Radio Live. And that's how the audience knows, if they're listening to the Radio Theater or our talk show or the live show. But on certain platforms, you can click to play. You can click on the image you can click the play button. It'll bring up the image that I have put into our podcatcher, or our pod host, which then, if the audience or whoever's listening is unsure of if they're listening to the Radio Theater or the Radio Hour or the live stream or something, all they have to do is look at the picture and they'll see the cover. This one's pretty cool. The cover for the Radio Hour is the brand's image, or the brand colors, with a vinyl record halfway out of the vinyl box, and it says Retrospection Radio Hour, and it's got our little logo on there too.
Right on.
And then the Radio Theater has its own logo. Each season has its own logo, and then the new Radio Live will have its own logo too. It's a black and white logo of an old microphone, and it looks really, really old talk show. So did a lot of branding on there. And hey, if you're listening and you haven't seen this stuff yet, honestly, go give it a look. Look on Podbean. I believe you can look on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't quote me on that. We're on a lot of different podcatchers.
We're like deadheads. We're everywhere, man.
Exactly. Just everywhere. So yeah. Tweet us at _retro_radio_. I gotta change that handle here soon because it's kind of like, who wants the underscores in there, you know? Yeah. You could also just search up on any of your social medias you like, Retrospection Radio, and find us on there. But I'd love to hear your tweets today about especially the 90s, because at this point, almost the entirety of our audience has lived through the history we're discussing. Especially now that we're getting into the 90s, we have a really big... or at least I'm growing the millennial audience that we have, and it's especially important because our primary demographic was born in the 70s and lived through the 80s as teenagers, and our secondary demographic were born at the edge of the 80s or early 90s and lived through the 90s and early 2000s. So it's very interesting to hear what people have to say about the life that they lived during what's happening in the society. And I want to hop into the 90s with something really just... something that defines the 90s and 2000s. The Gulf War begins with Saddam Hussein accusing Kuwait of stealing oil from Iraq. Iraq invades Kuwait, and the U.S. sent 500,000 soldiers to defend Saudi Arabia against the invasion. So this would go on to define, like, not necessarily this particular war, or conflict, escalation, whatever they call it nowadays, but the concept of America going in and defending its economic interests would go, it still defines us to this day. That's why we get involved with people, is because money. Like, if you end up losing your trade or losing your allies, well, you're not getting as much money. So, and it's especially important for Saudi Arabia and everything that happened there because they are a big ally of ours. So, the thing that's very interesting, I used to work at Tuesday Morning, rest in peace. Corporation went during COVID, but, they were dying anyways before COVID. But one of the ladies I worked with was one of the first female journalists that was trained in armed combat, like that was trained with weapons and allowed to see combat because she was a journalist. Because all journalists that went into that war, at least from my understanding, had to be trained in combat to be able to defend themselves if something bad were to happen.
That's insane.
So she was a very wise and awesome lady, but she lived through that and, was one of the first people to do that, and I got to meet her and learn her story. Very interesting. The Gulf War is something that people just forget, unless they grew up during that time period. The Gulf War is just... It's one of those things where it just kind of exists, but it doesn't. Very Schrodinger. The Schrodinger War. So we'll hop off. 1990, we talked about this guy 27 years ago. South African, I have no idea how to say that word, anti-apartheid or anti-apartheid activist Nelson Mandela. Finally freed from prison 27 years as a political prisoner. Yep. So we talked about him in... 1960s is when he gets arrested, and finally here he is. Actually, let me double check that and make sure I'm right before I go on.
So I knew he was in I knew he was in prison for a long time, but I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah, 1962 was when he was arrested. So we talked about him in the 1960s episode. If you haven't listened to that, you don't need to listen to it, but I highly recommend going back because the 60s is a really awesome decade, and I think that was our first one we split into two parts because there's just so much in the 60s.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we discussed Nelson Mandela back in that episode and why he got arrested, but basically he was a political prisoner. Like, sum it up, just I don't know how else to say it. Like, just to sum it up. So there was a lot of stuff that happened in the 90s. In 1990, we got the U.S. Census, and it got about 248,718,301 people for an increase of 9.8% from the 1980 census. This is actually the smallest increase in population since the 1940 census, which is kind of interesting to think about. We grew, but we just didn't grow as much. We kind of hit that point where we're like, kind of not really plateauing, but pretty close.
We hit our peak. It's all down here from hill now. Downhill from here. It's all down here from hill. You know what? I like that better.
So here's some fun stuff. Do you remember what happened in '89 on the world political stage?
I'm going to guess the Berlin Wall came down.
Yep. Mr. Gorbachev, you gotta tear down that wall.
Well, we got to tear down the wall. It's very inconvenient.
So that's, I think that was 88 or really, really early 89. And what ends up happening is Bush goes off and he meets with Gorbachev and they start to finally dismantle the Soviet Union. So on February 7th, 1990, the Central Committee of the Soviet Communist Party gives up the monopoly of power, continuing the trend since the beginning of the Berlin Wall coming down. The Cold War was about to end. The ending of the Cold War was completed in many ways by the strong policies of Ronald Reagan towards the Soviet bloc. 6 days later, on February 13th, me no good math. On February 13th, a plan to reunite Germany was announced. In 1990, perhaps you've heard of this one. The largest art theft in U.S. history occurs in Boston, Massachusetts, when two thieves posing as policemen abscond more than 12 works of art worth an estimated $100 to $200 million from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum.
Wow. What kind of stuff did they steal? Like, does it have any examples?
Artwork. I don't know what else to say. Like paintings and stuff. I imagine a few like smaller sculptures, possibly bigger ones. But yeesh,
that's a lot to get away with. It was just two people?
2 people.
Man,
that's pretty impressive when you think about it. I mean,
that is, yeah.
To be fair, $100 to $200 million worth of art could be like 3 pieces.
It could. Or it could be more. It depends on where you're.
It could be more.
Like you could go to like the Louvre and you could just get away with one and have that much money under your belt.
That's fair. So, U.S. President George H.W. Bush and Gorbachev sign a treaty to eliminate chemical weapon production and begin the destruction of each nation's current inventory of chemical weapons. I pressed the wrong button.
Oh, man. Anything but the wrong one.
So, the Hubble Space Telescope is launched in 1990 also.
I love the Hubble telescope. It's cool.
So, we're going to hit 1991 now. 1991, we start off strong with some really amazing thing. The Reds are dead. The Soviet Union is dissolved. and the 15 separate republics, including Russia, are now independent. Yay!
It took them a long time.
Yeah, well, you know.
How long would you say? That's almost 80 years for them to do that.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised the Soviet Union lasted as long as it did. To be fair, North Korea.
No one was really stopping them.
Yeah, economically we were, but other than that, it's not like we were. We couldn't go to war with them. Nukes, mutually assured destruction, stopped us from having an actual war.
That, and we saw what happened when the Nazis tried to fight them on their own turf.
Or the French, or
anybody.
I was going to say, I think the Mongolians at some point.
Literally anyone. They're just like, yeah, we live in the coldest place possible. And most of our landmass is frozen wasteland that is uninhabitable. Try and come and get us. And then they try.
And then they try, and we see what happens there. So, the Russian history. Like I've said through the past, 40, 50 years, I just want to do an episode or two or maybe a little bit more on Russian history, and I'm curious if people would be interested in that. If you're listening now, I would love to hear your tweets at _retro_radio_ on Twitter on whether or not you'd want to hear about Russian history, because, as we were going through, we mentioned there was a revolution that happened, but we never really explained, some of the stuff in the gulags were, ugh. And even when Stalin died, just everyone vying for power during that time, or even when Stalin was alive, and just some of the stuff he did, Rasputin, a lot of the stuff in the 1900s, but even before then, hitting the 1800s and the 1700s, it's really, really interesting to look at during the Napoleonic times what Russia was doing and how they eventually became the superpower that they did in the 1900s and even to modern day. So, the Russians, man, I don't know what else to say. Those are...
Honestly, I'd be interested in that just because I don't really know a lot of Russian history.
Yeah, well, so you've got some really awesome stuff like Catherine the Great, and people either know about her, and if you know about her, you know a lot about her, and if you don't know about her, then you're like, who's Catherine the Great? What did she do? So
she seems like she was pretty great.
She was pretty cool. Yeah, she's one of the more well-known Russian figureheads. Although you've got Rasputin and Stalin and all them from the 1900s, which are also...
Was Ivan the Terrible one of them?
Ivan the Terrible was Russian, yes.
I do know. The only I don't really know much about Ivan the Terrible, but I know that really crazy painting of him killing his son, and it's
yeah,
and multiple people have tried to destroy the painting, someone threw a I don't know what it was. It was those velvet ropes, the little stands that they go on.
Yeah.
Someone threw one of those at it. Someone tried to stab it. For some reason, people just do not like that painting. But I think it's really cool because it's just really disturbing looking.
It's, so... Ivan the Terrible was around in the 1500s, and we're going to derail as we always do.
Yes.
1530 to 1584, and he was the Grand Prince of Moscow. He is someone who'd get his own episode. A lot of the Russian leaders are people who would get their own episodes. Maybe that's what we'll do. We'll go through the
different figures of Russian history.
Of Russian history, yeah, and kind of just get from, Russian history starting out maybe with Ivan the Terrible in the 1500s, and then we'll jump to Catherine the Great in the 1700s, and
eventually you get to the Romanovs, and then you get to those nasty old dictators and stuff like that.
What a grand time Russian history is, and they don't teach it in American school systems, so it's really sad because, the stereotype is Russians drink vodka. Well, vodka's made from potatoes. How did they get potatoes in Russia? which is an actual story of why.
I never thought about that.
Exactly. Like, vodka became extremely popular in Russia because of a certain reason. And there was a bunch of exporting of potatoes into Russia, and then they were like, okay, well, we're going to use this to, get drunk. But the question is, why? So I think that's a lot of that stuff is future episodes, but it's a great question of why potatoes, and how did they get exported in, and imported in, and who was the one exporting potatoes to the Russians?
Who is responsible for this?
That's right. Who is responsible for this gross stereotype of Russians?
Well, although I've been kind of like fascinated about Russian history a little bit because someone that I know like gave me a book by Ayn Rand, and it was called like We the Living, and it's basically about like some little girl like growing up like post-Russian Revolution Russia.
Yep.
And like the way that like the scenery is like described and like the places, it sounds like it's not a real place. Like it's just like all these just abandoned, like just run down places and people living like basically hand to mouth, like really scraping by. And it's kind of fascinating because it's like it's something that you've never really like seen before, especially if you're an American for the most part. Well, depending on where you are in America. But it's like it's really dystopian and just odd.
What a great way to describe Russia. Dystopian and odd.
Like especially like right after the revolution when like everyone was like, "Oh, this won't last," and blah blah blah, and like everyone's poor and you can kind of get behind the optimism, but little do they know that it's only gonna get worse.
So much worse.
And then I guess you could say it gets a little better, and then it gets a little worse again. But I mean, who's to say?
So, I'm the 90s. I'm just gonna we're gonna talk a little bit more about this, or about all of these things, but I'm just gonna say a lot of the bad stuff that happened in the 90s was pretty bad.
I don't doubt that. The 90s was a very weird time.
You had the Los Angeles riots, you had the Oklahoma City bombing, Columbine, Bosnian genocide, and the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which I will say is not really the worst thing that happened in the 90s, but, it was pretty bad for the people at the time.
It's not even the worst thing that a president did.
Yeah, well,
Or at least got called out for.
The people in the 90s thought that Monica Lewinsky and the whole, you can't do that with someone who's not your wife. No bueno.
Well,
boy, what a fun scandal we'll get to in the second part of this, 95 and up. So let's jump back from Russia and go to something that's kind of sad. Magic Johnson tests HIV positive and retires from the NBA.
Oh, not Magic.
Yeah, he I don't remember why, actually. I think it was maybe drugs.
When did he retire?
91.
Really? That early? Man. I thought he retired a little later than that. What do we got?
If only I could actually type. So I was wrong about the drugs. So the good thing is, he stated that his wife Cookie and their unborn child did not have HIV. And Magic Johnson would dedicate his life to battling the deadly disease. He at first said he did not understand how he got it, but he later came out and said it was through having numerous partners during his career. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's Magic Johnson.
I mean, if you're someone like Magic Johnson, you're gonna have a lot of partners because you're Magic Johnson.
I mean, that's kind of the Monica Lewinsky thing too. Is like these people who are married with kids on the way or supposedly happily married. Should they, a lot of the times these people let fame go to their heads. You see it a lot in rock and roll where they've got wives or girlfriends at home, and it just ends up being not a grand old time for the people at home because they're running around with a bunch of other people who are much, much younger than their wives or girlfriends at home.
And then they come home, and next thing you know, they come home and they got the clap.
That's right. They what a good way of saying it. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. A lot of times famous people let that happen, which is a shame
because it's so easy to do. It's so easy to get into because like you just have all these people that are just like they want to be around you, and some want to be really around you. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's just something that it happens. Some people don't get into it, and that's awesome that people don't buy into that. But there's some, it's so tempting.
I am rewatching Almost Famous in one of my classes, which I've seen numerous times at this point. Seems like every year of college, there's one professor who's like, Almost Famous is the best movie of all time, and we must watch it. It's a good movie, but like...
I haven't seen it.
You'd like it a lot.
I probably would.
You would love it. So it's about Cameron Crowe, who was a Rolling Stone editor, and when he was 14 years old, he ended up going on tour with the Allman Brothers, and he wrote...
I like it already. I love the Allman Brothers.
There you go. And he wrote this article for Rolling Stone about what it was like to be in rock and roll and be with those people. And the movie gets rid of the Allman Brothers and replaces them with Stillwater. But it's still... It's basically the exact same story he wrote about. It's just that, Allman Brothers were like, nah.
It's like, we don't want to be in this movie.
Yeah, but it's got a lot of people in there. Zooey Deschanel's in there, and she's super young at that point. But basically, it's a 14-year-old journalist with a bunch of rockers as they travel around on tour, and eventually, won't spoil that, but basically, it's how these people, like especially rock stars, hated journalists, especially Rolling Stone, but kept them around to try and get good publicity, even though they were doing awful things. And
yeah,
it was a weird time. I mean, that's still how this goes. I mean, there's a bunch of scandals with celebrities of all sorts, music and movie and all of that, but it's just because these people end up in situations where they don't really realize how their power is manipulating the people around them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that makes all these celebrities sound like they're a bunch of evil people, and frankly, they are. I'm joking.
If you're famous, you're bad.
That's right. I don't care how famous. If 500 people know your name or 500,000, you're evil.
If any more than 100 people know who you are, you're evil.
So it is really weird. It's a really good movie, and the way it portrays the stuff that happens behind the scenes is so shell-shocking to someone who's not a part of that culture. You're like, really? Can these girls who are 14 and 15 lie and say they're 18 when they clearly don't look it? And do these musicians even care to figure it out, or are they just along for the ride?
Yeah, there's especially like around that time, like the 60s and the 70s, like there was a lot of things you hear, especially like, person like me likes to learn about these bands and stuff. You hear a lot of there's a lot of head turners in there,
Yeah.
like real like what?
Some bad things happened during that time. So, yeah. So that Magic Johnson, HIV, woohoo!
Magic Johnson.
Yeah, so it caused him to retire, and it's fame and all that. So we'll keep moving on with 1991. U.S. Congress passes a resolution authorizing the use of force to liberate Kauai. Operation Desert Storm begins 4 days later with airstrikes against Iraq. Iraq responds by sending 8 Scud missiles to Israel. So, yay! To be fair, a month and a half later, February 27th, 1991, the Gulf War ends when Iraq withdraws its forces and sets the oil fields on fire. A ceasefire is declared, and Iraq accepts the condition of disarmament after 100 hours of ground fighting. On April 3rd, the United Nations Security Council passes Resolution 687, calling for the destruction and removal of the entire Iraqi chemical and biological weapons stockpile, plus ballistic missiles with a range greater than 150 kilometers. Iraq agrees to withdraw its support of international terrorism. So basically what happens is kind of a Germany thing, where after World War I, the world was like, hey, Germany, we're taking away all of your weapons and everything that made you powerful in World War I. The Germany is like, okay, well, we don't like this. We're going to start mass producing them and start World War II, among a million other reasons as to why World War II happened. Same thing that kind of happens here. Looking back on it, I mean, Iraq ended up getting all of these weapons over the course of 20 years, and you've got 9/11, you've got a lot of different stuff that ends up happening from the fact that we, as a world, as the United Nations, basically neutered Iraq, took away all of their, to be fair, chemical and biological weapons they're against war protocols nowadays anyways. Like, if you use that stuff, a lot of nations still get away with it, but in general, using that stuff is seen as pretty bad. Like, it is not a humane way of killing people to just gas the trenches and let people choke, or just the disgusting stuff that happened in World War I and World War II for that matter. And that's why we ban them as a world. But, people don't really care about that.
Yeah, doesn't really stop some people, regrettably.
Well, and the idea here is that with getting rid of ballistic missiles greater than 150 kilometers, Iraq couldn't just bomb Israel for no reason one day, because that's one of the issues that
it's always Israel.
It's always Israel. It's such a hot topic nowadays because it's the Holy Land for 3 religions. Yeah, and
everybody wants a piece of Israel.
Everyone wants a piece of Israel. And Israel is our ally and one of the only people in the Middle East that were like, hey, I don't care if you blow up Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, any of those people, but leave Israel alone. That's it. And it really shows that the UN putting the ballistic missiles, banning ballistic missiles that be able to hit Israel, it really shows our preference towards Israel. To be fair, they're our allies. If Germany were to attack everyone again and we were to beat down Germany, we'd say, okay, stop blowing up France. Like, it's been more than twice at this point in history where Germany's just walked in and blown up France. And France has only done it to Germany, Prussia at the time, once. So just, Germany, stop blowing things up. In the same sense,
Germany, stop trying to fight the world.
You lose every time. You do well sometimes, but you lose every time.
It's like, it's like you just got to stop it. Right? You're not the fatherland
Bad
anymore.
Germany.
The Deutschland, but come on, you guys aren't as big and bad as you used to be. You're just like everybody else now. You're part of the club. Come on.
So this is where everyone start to get worried, because once you effectively remove the weapons from other people, this is why it matters that North Korea has been testing nuclear weapons or, big bombs and being able to shoot them across the continent, or India for that matter. With their
they
recent...
were trying to do like test missiles, try to shoot them across the ocean, weren't
exactly
they?
in recent history, the past 10 years.
I remember hearing about that and people freaking out, and I was like, well, they got pretty far, but they didn't make it.
That's true, but like, if they want it, the thing people always forget is that North Korea hates Japan. I mean, and South Korea. If anything, they're going to blow up South Korea, but they're going to hit Japan next, because I've talked about this before, and actually we're in the correct decade where in the 1990s a bunch of Japanese citizens start getting abducted and brought to North Korea to teach North Koreans Japanese, so that way the North Koreans could basically put sleeper agents in Japan and cause terrorist attacks, which North Korea promised they wouldn't do again. Okay. A lot of those people are still missing and unconfirmed whether or not they're dead.
That's a very scary thought.
Yeah, that's a whole other storyline, but it is super interesting. Honestly, if you're listening right now and that tickles your fancy, I would just Google like missing Japanese citizens, North Korea. Like there was one part where a North Korean posing as a Japanese citizen blew up an airplane flight, and the Japanese went to recover the wreckage and see what happened, and North Korea had cleaned it up. So Japan never knew what happened besides it blew up, clearly because of the plane crash, but we don't know where the plane is. So very, very interesting world events, but my whole point that I'm going to circle back around to is America and the Soviet Union are huge. They are the world superpowers. I mean, not Soviet Union anymore, especially in our current history we're talking about, but for a very long time, we were the world superpowers. And why that matters is nuclear weapons. We are capable of destroying the world over and over and over again if we want to. And that matters to smaller nations. Like, let's look at India and their recent getting of nuclear weapons. Actually, let's look at North Korea. This is a better example for it. When you are a smaller nation which goes against American values, all America has to do is say, hey, you're going to listen to what we say.
Or we press the button.
Well, as a smaller nation, at that point, you are oppressed by a much larger nation that you can't possibly fight. And they have a one-stop shop to destroy everything you own in a matter of minutes. That's not cool.
No,
that's pretty uncool. History at this point is really interesting, but over the course of our lifetimes, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. Everyone's going to be at each other's throats because the more people who get nuclear weapons, the more dangerous the world becomes. And not even just that, not everyone abides by mutually assured destruction, in the sense of, if North Korea decides to send their nukes to us, and we say, cool, we're retaliating by launching our nukes to you, we're killing all those people, and they're killing us too. It's this idea of, once we do that, North Korea might have a secret alliance still with the Russians. And, the Russians get mad at us for blowing up North Korea, and then they send missiles to us, and we're mad at the Russians. Or UK, by this point, we're gone. UK is mad at the Russians, and the UK fires on the Russians, and the Russians get blown up, and the Chinese don't like that, and then they blow up. And
the next thing you know,
the world's gone.
Everybody's playing Fallout.
Exactly. And that's the issue with the current age and what's happening in the world. Nuclear weapons.
There's a lot of nuclear weapons that have gone, there's an amount. I forget how many number there are. There's way too many, I would say.
Yeah.
But anyway, Like, but there's a lot of them that are like undocumented and like they don't know about because they went missing. I think like around the time like the Cuban Missile Crisis and like all that stuff during like the Cold War. Like a lot of that stuff was being moved around, and we don't know where it is. It's unaccounted for, and that's even more scary because they're probably, you know, they're somewhere, they're around. Nobody knows where, and those who do know are not telling.
Exactly. And this gets into the issue of never again can we, as America, step in and end those tensions with the Soviet Union by saying, okay, we're going to go to war, which is how we've been doing it how everyone has been doing it for centuries upon centuries. Now we have to dance around and hope we don't make someone mad one day and blow them up. So,
we're already in the process of doing that from what I have heard recently.
I mean, following modern politics is always doom and gloom. It always feels like we're going to blow up. It always feels like we're going to die. It always feels like
you know,
the nation's
that happened
falling
like a year or like maybe 2 years ago. It was like, it's always in January where there's like some news of like, the
world's going to end this year.
World War III is going to happen this year. And then the year happens and it doesn't happen.
That was 2020, COVID, January. Before COVID hit, everyone was like, World War III, because there was a whole bunch of alliances over the course of the world.
Because Russia did a thing, and then we were like, World War III.
Actually, I think it had to do with the Middle East, if I remember correctly. It was an oil issue. But
it was one of them that was Russia.
So it's the phrase that I don't know what World War III will be fought with, but I know World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Rocks. I think it was that Albert Einstein that said that?
That was Albert Einstein, yes.
Yeah.
So
you got that right.
The idea that we're dealing with right now in the 90s and in modern day is these smaller nations are trying to find a way to punch up. And America and Russia at least understand if we nuke each other, we're gone. There's nothing left of the planet. But these smaller nations that are starting to get nuclear weapon and that are invading each other for oil and, you know, North Korea don't understand this.
Yeah,
or at least they don't understand it as well as a large nation like we do.
Nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Exactly. And that's the scariest thing in the world. Like, I don't see any issues with India, but if you remember this during COVID, if India had fallen and broken apart when it got hit by COVID really hard and there was just people dying in the streets and it broke apart, which, to be fair, India and China are the two, now that I think about it, longest living countries. Like, both of those are ancient. So if that were to happen and there were to be like the communists come into power and they decide, okay, well, or with Indians, there's a huge divide between a bunch of the different religions, including Hinduism and Islam. If a bunch of Hindus came into power and they said, all right, well, we now have nuclear weapons, the Muslims do not, and we don't like them being in India. We feel like they've been ruining our country for centuries, or whatever they want to say. They could just nuke them, or they could just shoot it at Africa. They could hit the areas, or Pakistan is a great example. They could hit the areas that influence Muslim Indians and just nuke them off the planet. Well, the rest of the world's not going to be okay with that. That's such a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And then, it's only a temporary problem for the people in power. Or the roles could be reversed, and Muslim Indians decide they want to blow up the Hindus. Like, it could be any role, as long as it is a smaller nation that gets this power and doesn't realize the idea of mutually assured destruction. Which is where, the end of the Cold War eases some of that pain, but now we have a whole bunch of issues. And, all of this stemmed from This big long tangent stemmed from the Iraqi chemical and biological weapons stockpile and ballistic missiles being taken away. And a lot of nations hate when that happens because, now they have to listen to America or Russia. So, going back, 1991, the governor of Arkansas. Arkansas, that's right. The governor of Arkansas, which I'm pretty sure is not actually a real place. I've never heard of it, and I don't think we'll ever hear of it again after this singular interesting event that happened in Arkansas. William Jefferson Clinton, Bill Clinton, announces his intention to seek the 1992 Democratic nomination for the presidency of the United States.
I want to be the president.
And we're never going to hear of Arkansas again. It's not real. Like, you have...
Arkansas is a very interesting place.
Is it? Name one thing you know besides Bill Clinton.
There's a town called Little Rock in there.
Okay. That is famous for not good reasons.
You're right.
Hold on. I've got the Google machine here. I'm gonna just search up
No offense to people from Arkansas, but I don't know a lot of things.
Okay, I don't even think we have any listeners from Arkansas at all.
I don't know much about Arkansas. Like that, and like a lot of those Midwestern states, they're just kind of really fuzzy to me. Like Idaho and stuff like that.
The World's Championship Duck Calling Contest is held in Stuttgart, Arkansas.
Yeah, that seems right.
Walmart was founded in Bentonville.
In Arkansas?
Apparently. What are 3 facts about Arkansas?
Go figure.
Nickname, the natural state. Statehood, 1836, the 25th state. Population was 2,988,248. Capital is Little Rock. Biggest city is Little Rock. Abbreviation R. State bird, the mockingbird. Okay, that's fun. And the apple blossom is the state flower. What did Arkansas invent? The Bowie knife. There you go. James Bowie was actually... the Bowie knife, James Bowie. The Bowie knife was crafted by Arkansas blacksmith James Black, according to the Historic Arkansas Museum.
Bowie knives are nice.
I love Bowie knives. They're pretty cool. There you go. There's one good thing Arkansas did. Arkansas's top 10 famous foods. Fried hand pies.
What? What is that?
Fried catfish. French fries.
Are all of these things fried?
Pretty much.
Oh, jeez. Come
on. Fried hand pies. They are pockets of fruit. Fried pie. What?
Like fruit?
Oh, they're like handheld fried fruits.
Huh.
Fried catfish. French fries. Fried okra. Fried green tomatoes.
They're all fried.
Donuts.
Even though everything is fried.
Fried chicken. Hush puppies, which are also fried. Fried pickles. And onion rings, which are fried.
Come on. Arkansas.
Arkansas, you are the most American,
That's it.
Oh, no. It is... The food from Arkansas is the stereotype of America. Thank you, Arkansas.
You're holding us back, Arkansas. You're making us look bad. You're making us look bad on the world stage. Get your top 10 foods together.
Here's 29 facts about Arkansas by we're just gonna derail for a minute by Karen Lenhart.
This episode is about Arkansas.
That's right. We'll stop at 1991. We'll finish the year and we'll just go into Arkansas. So, the first fact about Arkansas. The first European to reach Arkansas... I was about to say Arkansas. Why is it... To reach Arkansas was explorer Hernando de Soto in 1541. Arkansasian? Like, it's spelled Arkansasan. Arkansan.
Arkansas?
I guess?
I don't know.
What a... Ugh.
Well,
I don't like this state. I'm just going to say it. I
will
don't think
say
I like this.
We're not much better because one of our famous foods is just peanut butter and chocolate candies.
Hey, but at least that's good.
They are good. I'm not saying they're not. But it's weird that we're famous for that.
Well, it's...
Like, we invented that. It's like, no, we didn't invent that.
We invented that because of the Buckeye nut, which is extremely poisonous and will kill you if you eat it. Which is even funnier that we're like, you know what? We're from Ohio. We like corn. And we're going to make chocolate peanut butter that looks like this nut that'll kill you. So that way...
And we're going to have a school in our capital city. And you know what else we're going to do with that? We're going to make the mascot that nut. For some reason.
The funny thing to me is, well, I guess this isn't really funny, but imagine a kid just, they've eaten Buckeyes before, and then they're walking down the street and they see a natural Buckeye and they're like, oh, I bet this is, what the chocolate peanut butter candies are based off of. And then by association, the kid eats a poisonous nut and dies. Like,
I almost did try to,
I mean, they're really hard to eat.
Everybody has them in their house. Around here, at least.
Everyone. Like, my parents have them. It's ridiculous.
I had a jar of Buckeyes in my house. But, you try to pick one up. You like, look at it, I did try, but they're too hard.
Well, here's some fun stuff about
I'm afraid
Arkansas.
of whoever can break that open with their teeth and eat that. I'm terrified of them. Don't come near me, please.
I'm reinterested in how just weird Arkansas is. Haiti Wyatt Caraway, 1931 to 1945. What? Oh, she was the first woman elected to serve a full term as the United States Senator.
That's cool.
You could fit all of Greece and almost all of Puerto Rico in Arkansas.
That is... What? That's...
Yeah, America is huge. Like, it's a lot bigger than people give it credit for.
Oh, yeah, it's big. It's so big, there's, different biomes that happen in it. Like, you'll be, in the mountains. And then you keep on driving or you keep on flying or wherever, and you mosey on over here, you got swamps. You mosey on over there, you got...
just deserts.
And then you mosey on a little further, you got plains and other stuff, and you mosey on up north, and then you got tundras. Why do we have everything? We have coasts, we've got beaches.
This is a fun little thing that ties into
and
magic.
We have Ohio.
That's right. Ohio is America. If it weren't for Ohio, there'd be no America. When I think of...
sure about... Wait, really?
No.
Not
at all.
I was like, don't say that.
So Ohio's not one of the 13 original colonies.
No.
And Ohio was a part of the Louisiana Purchase, right?
I don't know. Wasn't it one of the first non-colonial states established?
Yeah, okay. Ohio is the 17th state, and it was part of the Louisiana Purchase. That's what I thought, because what ended up happening was people came north, and this is where Westerville and Galena and all those histories come in. There's a whole... When Franklinton, now Franklin County, Franklin Township, when Franklinton was settled, I mean, you had Tecumseh and a lot of other Shawnee. They were the primary Native Americans in the area that were in Ohio. And I remember hearing about it because, first off, I was in a play about Ohio history, but not even just that. It's
You saw the Tecumseh thing, didn't you?
Exactly. And
I saw that once, too.
The only interesting history Ohio has from that time period, because... I mean, New Orleans, you've got all the stuff about floods, and you've got a bunch of stuff about ambushes, and Ohio has that. It's just that Ohio is basically a bunch of white people moved in and then was like, hey, we'd like to live with you guys relatively peacefully. And everyone was kind of like, we don't want you around. And the white people were like,
die.
Well, not even really die. Because, I mean, yeah, that's what happens throughout American history anyways. But it was
all those, like, all those old Indian mounds and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we know nothing about them because all the people that built them, we were like, get out of here. Go.
Bye-bye.
And they dispersed, and now there's no, like, I don't know what the word is, like, local kind of, like, generational knowledge passed down. So now we have all these earthworks, and we're just guessing what they're for.
It's so weird because, like, these awful things happened, but not only do we not talk about it in history, Ohio did it, I would say, to a lesser extent than a lot of the other states that ended up in the Louisiana Purchase, because a lot of that was Southern stuff. So not only were you dealing with kicking people off their land, but you were also dealing with slavery. So you had a lot of Southern state stuff that was happening, and then Ohio just kind of shows up and people are like, well, let's grow corn here. There's a lot of shale around, which makes it really hard to grow crops. So we're going to keep growing corn. It's just, like, Tecumseh was a super interesting, I don't know if it's politically correct or not to call him an Ohioan, but in the sense of...
an interesting man.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, not in the sense of, like, he was an Ohioan and this, like, white culture trying to overthrow. I don't know. I don't know what people get angry about, but in the sense of that,
don't trip on it too much.
Just gonna say it's just in the sense of, like, Ohioan, as in he lived in this land, and he is one of the staples of Ohio. That everyone's like.
Every time I go to Chillicothe, I pass by that Tecumseh sign and say,
exactly.
Yeah, there's the outdoor drama.
Well, I mean, and I've read books about him, and just. Really, really interesting person, and all the people around him were equally as interesting, and it's cool. Like, he is a part of Ohioan history that's so interesting to learn about.
I think one of the most interesting things is that nobody knows where he's buried.
That is...
I don't know why I find that interesting, but I find that really cool that, like, I mean, obviously somebody knows because somebody had to bury him, but... like, nobody knows where he's buried. People have guesses, but nobody knows definitively where he's at. And I think that's really cool.
Tecumseh is a cool person.
He is cool.
That's what I'm going to leave that at.
He's awesome.
So, during the height of the AIDS pandemic in Arkansas, which I know right now is, like, getting renamed or, like, getting changed because... I don't know. I honestly have no idea. I don't follow a lot of this stuff. But don't cancel me over for this. A lone woman single-handedly buried and held funerals for over 40 gay men when their own families wouldn't hold funerals for them, which is a really cool Arkansas fact. It's a shame that happened to those people, but it's kind of cool to hear that just one person went off and did that. Arkansas is the only... wow. Arkansas has the only active diamond mine in the United States. They hold the duck calling contest. The 3 largest diamonds found in America were found in Arkansas because of their diamond mines. Yeah, so Arkansas inventions include the Bowie knife, fried pickles, modern archery, I don't really know what that means, the Wonder Horse, and cheese-filled hot dogs. Oh, boy.
That's...
More catfish are eaten in Arkansas than any other state. I think it's really funny that this is 29 fun facts about Arkansas, and it's like, they're fun, but they're not impressive. Like, you could look at Washington, D.C., or New York, or any of these things, and search up 29 facts about them. And it would be so much more historically relevant and interesting than the facts that I'm reading about Arkansas. And I'm skipping most of these facts because most of them are like, there are 11.8 billion trees in Arkansas. Yay!
Woo!
In the early 20th century, Arkansas hot springs were a popular hotspot for baseball spring training.
Hot springs?
Yeah.
They got hot springs in Arkansas?
Yeah.
Huh. I never would have figured.
Oh, here's fun. Here's fun. This is fun. This is a great thing about Arkansas. The worst mass murderer in Arkansas history was Ronald Gene Simmons. He murdered his entire family of 14, including his 20-month-old grandson, and then shot 2 other people. Thanks, Arkansas.
Thank you.
Walmart in Rogers, Arkansas. The name Arkansas means people who live downstream. These are awful fun facts. I'm just going to say it.
These aren't fun.
They're not. It's like, it's just kind of convincing me I don't like Arkansas.
I'm sorry. Sorry if any listeners are from Arkansas or in Arkansas.
I don't even know if we have any listeners in Arkansas. We got a lot of Californians.
We might eventually.
Might eventually, that's.
But I just want to say, I have no opinion on Arkansas. I don't really have an opinion on most states because I haven't seen them.
Here's a fun thing that never gets talked about. You know Napoleon Bonaparte?
Yes, I do.
When do you think he lived?
I would say through the kind of the late 1700s and maybe the early 1800s.
Okay.
The very early 1800s.
1769 to 1821.
Yeah, I got it right.
So, America is born at this point.
Yeah.
It is a living, breathing thing, which is funny because the Napoleonic Wars and Prussia and France and all of that seems so European.
And maybe even just so distant to what was going on in America at that time, because everything was just so, I guess, primitive. Not really. More advanced. I don't know. We were starting out.
We're starting out. Well, and it's something that, because of the way American history is taught in schools, you learn about American history, but you don't learn what else is happening in the world.
Yeah. And but then later on you'll learn about world history and you'll learn about the stuff that was happening at the same time, but you don't connect them together.
Exactly. So here's something that people don't ever connect together. Napoleon Bonaparte, former leader of France, sold Arkansas to the United States as part of the Louisiana Purchase. Napoleon Bonaparte, the famous guy, you know who he is, Napoleon Bonaparte.
People say he's short and he was actually average height for his time.
Exactly. And, we got the Louisiana Purchase from him, which is such a weird thing to think about because, he was the first and only emperor of France. So, it's just weird to think about that America during this time, the 1800s, where honestly, it was only 200 years ago that we were starting to go out west with the gold rush and all that. So it's, the Oregon Trail. Very weird. Strange stuff to think about. I don't really care about the rest of these. Yeah, this is a terrible fun fact. The mascot for the Arkansas School for the Deaf is named Def Leppard. In 2016, the students met their mascot's famous namesake, Def Leppard. It's like, why is this a claim to fame for Arkansas?
What does it matter if they meet Def Leppard? Because, so they can't listen to Def Leppard. They're deaf.
Oh, God.
I'm serious.
You're going to get us canceled.
No, I'm serious. What is the point of that happening?
Well, my bigger question is, who is the guy who made their mascot a deaf leopard for the School of the Deaf?
Whoever did that is just a real jerk, and I got to say that's not funny. That's such a poor taste. I was gonna say, honestly,
I can't tell if that's an edgy joke or.
I thought you were messing with me when you said that.
No. The Arkansas School for the Deaf is named the mascot is named Def Leppard, and the students got to meet Def Leppard in 2016.
That's not funny at all. That's a mean joke.
I was gonna say it's funny in the mean sense of, you know.
Yeah. But
here's fun fact number 29.
Whoever came up with that, shame on you. Shame on you, man.
I actually, in 1973, a severe storm picked up and rained down over 100 ducks in Arkansas. Arkansas has a thing for ducks. Hopefully that person who named the school of the deaf, the mascot for the school of the Def Leopard, got hit by one of those ducks. A severe storm picked up and rained down over 100 ducks in Arkansas. Like, why is this a fun fact about your state?
Yeah, it rained ducks one time.
It's like, okay, why? Why do I care?
How?
Well, it's a storm, you know? Storms are, I don't know. I don't care. We're going back to the 90s.
Yeah, let's go back to the 90s.
I'm done with Arkansas. I don't like that state. Bad state.
See ya, Arkansas.
1992, riots erupt in South Central LA following the acquittal of 4 white police officers who were caught on video beating a speeding suspect, Rodney King. I'm sure you've heard these. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I was gonna say your face like lit up right there. Yeah, during the riots, 55 people were killed and 2,300 people were injured, and 1,100 buildings were destroyed.
Yeah, that was a very messed up event that happened there. The whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. No further thing to talk about in there. So the renewed nation of Russia, which was recreated after, the Soviet Union was dissolved. And their leader, Boris Yeltsin, never heard of that guy, announced that they will stop targeting the cities of the United States with nuclear weapons. Yay! I mean, to be fair, I don't know. That should never have happened in the first place between either side, but whatever. Nuclear weapons, at least they started to kind of remove hostilities there. The Salt River Bay National Historical Park and Ecological Preserve, what a very, very long name, is established through legislation signed by George H.W. Bush. The park in St. Croix of the, I imagine that's St. Croix, of the U.S. Virgin Islands is the only location under the jurisdiction of the United States where the men of Christopher Columbus are known to have been. What a strange thought too, but we'll get into that at a probably never. 26th, I can't speak tonight. I'm having a lot of trouble here. 27th Amendment to the Constitution is passed 202 years after its initial proposal. It bars the United States Congress from giving itself a midterm or retroactive pay raise. This amendment had been originally proposed by James Madison in 1789 as part of 12 amendments, of which 10 would become the original Bill of Rights. It took them a little while, because at this point, Congress, politicians, man, they make so much money and they don't need to. The siege of Ruby Ridge is begun by United States Marshals, lasting 10 days. The incident would end with the acquittal of all but one minor charge against the Weaver family and led to admonishment of the handling of the incident by federal authorities. 1992, in a three-way race, November 3rd, 1992. In a three-way race for the presidency of the United States, Democratic candidate Bill Clinton defeats incumbent President George H.W. Bush and businessman H. Ross Perot. I don't know why I was like, H.R., sure. Of the Reform Party. Many trace the loss of President Bush to his reneging pledge for no new taxes, of which he brought in new taxes. Clinton received only 43% of the popular vote, but 370 electoral votes to Bush with 37.4% and 168 electoral college votes. Perot garnered 18.9% of the popular vote, but no electoral college votes. So, funny how this works. In 1992, we actually had a three-party system where it doesn't necessarily, Perot was never going to win. There was just no chance. But it was very interesting that somebody got that much of the vote against Clinton and Bush in recent history, because I don't know about you, but it feels like the U.S. is and will always be a two-party system. And to think that there was actually, in recent history, somebody who, actually stood a chance. But yeah, Clinton received 43% of the popular vote. I think that's funny. With 370 electoral votes. Just electoral college, man. Everyone hates it. Unless you don't.
and we can't get rid of it. We've tried, but we can't.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, politicians have no reason to get rid of it, because the electoral college is what keeps it swaying one way or the other. So I don't know. I'm not going to get into the electoral college stuff, because that's a hot topic for a bunch of people.
A nation run by the people, for the people. And
sure.
And well,
here's the thing. The people are stupid.
So we have a bunch of old guys decide stuff for us because we can't behave.
Exactly. Well, and that's where you run into the issue of the 1700s, of where you actually needed the electoral college. And the further it's a really interesting debate, because the further you get into the information era, which is, the era we're in right now with the internet and all that, the easier it is for people to be misled about different things. So
it's much easier to lie.
Yes. And you could get away, and it's also a lot harder because there are people digging into your stuff. So it's a very interesting debate on whether or not we need the electoral college, because there are people out there who just end up getting brainwashed, and they'll just vote, or they party line vote, and that's it. They don't even consider anything else. And
it's easy to fool people, but it's kind of hard to lie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a very interesting debate there, where I'm not, I try and stay apolitical on Retrospection Radio, which goes to the Retrospection Radio Hour. But if you're not familiar with the debate, my listeners, it's more than worth your time to go through and just kind of figure out where you stand on the electoral college. If anything, just because you like politics and you want to know if you're actually for it or against it. Because a lot of people end up just saying, every election, one side or the other is like, the electoral college is stupid, we should abolish it. And then the side who won is like, no, we shouldn't. But you as a person, sit down and figure out, and I encourage everyone to get, politically intelligent and start researching the things they believe and why they believe them and whether or not they actually believe. But electoral college, man.
I try to stay out of the political game for the most part, 'cause it's just so draining. I mean, I don't purposefully ignore it. It's just something that's not really on my radar. But with most things, I've always been this way. It's a drama in both the political landscape and the drama that happens around me in the world. I remain aloof. I don't really care about what happens.
That fits your personality pretty well. I mean, we can tell by the music you like that you probably wouldn't be that interested in politics and the way the world is.
I am in some ways, but it's just more of just kind of a philosophical kind of thing in a way, just kind of seeing the way people are and stuff like that. And I have some basic ideas of how, politics and stuff like that, but a lot of it just doesn't really make any sense to me to really dedicate so much energy into it. So I just kind of stay on the outside of it, and I watch from the sidelines, and I and I laugh / cringe / get angry / all emotions that it would elicit in a person.
I'm super political, but I don't bring that into retrospection. And if I do, I will, like, this season bashes Christians and, like, Christianity a lot this season that comes out. And you'll get into that in the further seasons, or in the later part of the season. And it's meant to, because it has a statement to make about the core of modern day Christianity, which people need to hear and then make
even other religions too.
Yeah, I mean it primarily focuses on Christianity, but if you take out Christianity, you can replace it with Islam and
that's really
a lot of Western religions.
And it's really fascinating, like when you take even a cursory glance of like kind of the structures of different religions and how they like work and how they exist in the world, and a lot of them are really similar to each other. And like, you know, I don't have really any opinion. I'm not a very religious person. I'm the kind of person that takes what I need and I leave the rest, you know. And like, you know, it's like, so you kind of glance at these different belief systems and stuff, and you're kind of like, well, there's a lot of crossover and there's a lot of difference, but there's definitely, especially a lot of crossover, like especially between like, what would you say the major religions are? Like Christianity and like like, you know, Judaism and Islam and stuff like that.
Yeah, those are your main Western religions that you see.
And those three alone are very similar to each other.
Well, they're all Abrahamic.
Yeah. And like even like, you know, like part of even like half the Bible, like the, you know, the regular Bible you can get anywhere, it's like half of it is like literally the whole, you know, it's like the Old Testament, like that's.
There are some differences between them, but yeah, there's a lot of the stories are similar, if not the same. And that's very interesting stuff.
And they all happen in the same area. Like all of the
well, that's why Israel matters so much.
Yeah. Because they're like, this is the Bible place. Or I mean, the Torah place, or the, you know, the Quran place. Yeah. This is the place where it all happened at the same time.
Imagine a world without religion. No crusades, no blowing up Israel, no Israel threatening to blow up other people. Like,
it would be very interesting.
To be fair, it'd probably be replaced with something else. You know,
yeah.
If it wasn't religion that was driving the cause of we need to go blow up these people and kill them and sack their cities, then it'd probably be something else of, you know, kind of like the Trojan War, where it's like, historically, it is most likely that they disagreed over trade disputes. But, of course, we know the Iliad and the Odyssey, where it's like the gods came down and interacted with this stuff.
The gods, Hermes stepped down and he said, whoa there.
Whoa, you guys are going too fast. I was just trying to deliver mail.
It's like, I'm going too fast for you guys, but man, I thought I was fast.
Oh, here's a fun thing. Since we're talking about religion, we're going to hop into 1993 now. February 26, 1993, the World Trade Center is bombed by Islamic terrorists when a van parked below the North Tower of the structure explodes. 6 people are killed and over 1,000 are injured.
In the basement?
It's not the basement. It's at the base.
Oh, it was
base
in
of the tower.
it was in the parking garage, wasn't it?
Yeah. Boom.
I
mean, not the worst thing that happened. Not sure if I should make that joke. People are still pretty sensitive about that.
It's weird that like within a decade of each other, there were attempts to destroy the World Trade Center.
And then they finally got one through.
And yeah, I mean, one of them was a little
more than an attempt.
A little more successful than the other one was, I would say, to put it.
I don't know, 1,000 people injured.
To put it extremely lightly.
Extremely lightly, yes. So the 51-day Waco standoff. Yeah, Waco. There we go.
Waco.
Now I remember
this.
51-day Waco standoff begins when the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms attempt to arrest the Branch Davidian leader David Koresh on federal arms violations. 4 agents and 5 members of the cult are killed in the raid. The siege ends on April 19th when a fire started by the Davidians killed 75 members of the group, including the leader.
Yeah, I'd say that in terms of cults, that'd probably want to be one of the real, like, high-profile ones next, like, since Jonestown, I would say.
I was going to say, since
like,
Jonestown.
I mean, how many casualties were there in Waco?
There were 75.
Oh, that's definitely
I guess 80.
That's nowhere near Jonestown. Jonestown's astronomical.
Yeah.
Compared to that.
Well, I don't think we've ever had anything before or after Jonestown that's like even hit those numbers before.
It's just a very unique set of circumstances that led to that. And even, I mean, with most cults, like, it's weird how they just, like, they never really just kind of exist. Like, they almost always just come to a head in some way, and it always results in death. And it's weird. Like, I don't get it. It's like, it's not, I'm not even talking about, like, religions. I just mean, like, cults. Like, you know, like Jonestown, like Heaven's Gate, and, like, you know, the Branch Davidians. And it's like, why? Why can't you just, like, just kind of hang out? You know, you can have your little, like, group and, you know, you gather together and believe in what you believe in. But you don't have to, like, you don't have to tangle with the ATF. It's not worth it. You don't have to give people cyanide Kool-Aid or put blankets over your head and try to hitch rides on UFOs behind comets and stuff. Like, it's not, it's like, why do they always do this stuff? I don't get it. It's weird. Like, it's really freaky to think about. It's like all of them, not all of them, but a lot.
I have no comment to say without offending religious people.
It's a charismatic leader, and you get a bunch of people who are. I'm not talking about, like, I just mean, like, these. It's kind of like, you know. Well, that's not a good example.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, Manson, because, like, the way Manson did, it's like he got all these people who were broken and whatever. But
that is how. I mean, that's how cults and religions target people. It's the people who are down on their luck, and that's where they say, "Hey, God can help you." That's why you have a large majority of religious populations being poor or lower income in general, because the idea of this omnipotent deity reaching out and handing stuff to help them in their lives sounds a lot better than the reality of you are born into this and you are statistically more likely to stay there for the rest of your life.
It's like someone told me one time, there's a lot of people in the world that are trying to fill a God-shaped hole in their life. I'm not sure what they meant by that, but it resonated with me. It seems true. I don't mean in, like, a bad way or try to put anybody down, but I feel like there is, you know, someone's just trying, like, people are just trying to fill something that's, like, missing in their lives. And it does, you know, usually people turn to religion after something really bad happens to them, or most of the time they're just raised that way, and that's just how they grew up, how they were brought up. But sometimes some people, it's just like, you know, it's just kind of like it's what they got, and it's kind of, it is interesting to think about. But, you know, I see it all just from on the outside, because, like I said, I'm not a particularly religious person. I just find religion fascinating from an outside perspective, and, you know, people can do what they want. I have no opinion on it.
So, back to 1993, because I've got to leave a bit earlier tonight. Kids on the Block go their separate ways.
New Kids on the Block?
Yeah, sorry, New Kids on the Block. Michael Jordan retires from the NBA.
I guess they didn't have the right stuff.
You make that joke, but that's actually what this article says.
No, they didn't.
After 7 years together, New Kids on the Block go their separate ways, proving that perhaps they did not have the right stuff after all.
Low-hanging fruit, I guess.
Yeah, you're. Yeah, Michael Jordan leaves the NBA and plays minor league baseball for.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, 17 months, and then comes back.
It's really weird that happened.
Yeah,
like you kind of forget about that.
So, 1993, Intel ships the first Pentium chips, which revolutionizes the processing of computers. And we're starting to see the technology age, the information era, begin to.
Here it comes.
Yeah, like by the end of the 90s, man.
We get the internet.
Yeah,
dial up, baby.
It's. I hear stories from people who would use dial-up internet, and they downloaded the Star Wars Episode 1 trailer, and it took them like hours upon hours, and they had to do it overnight, and they watched it for like a 3-minute video in 480p or whatever, and it's
probably honestly less than that.
Yeah, well, anyways, so we're starting to see modern era stepping in. President Bill Clinton orders a cruise missile attack on Iraqi intelligence headquarters in Baghdad, responding to the attempted assassination cultivated by Iraq's Secret Service on former President Bush during his visit to Kuwait 2 months before. So Clinton was like, look, Bush and I may be political opposites, but you don't try and kill him. I blow you up instead. And he blew them up.
Just blew him right up.
The Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act is signed into law by President Bill Clinton. 1994. We're at the end here because we always start 95 to we do 5 to 9 in the next episode. So here's the last year real quick. The North American Free NAFTA. You know what NAFTA is. Goes into effect, creating a free trade zone between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. The bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman are found outside Nicole Brown's home in Los Angeles, California. You know this one, too. This is a nice, famous one. 5 days later, her husband, former football star O.J. Simpson, and, of course, co-star of the Naked Gun movies, is arrested for the crime and is later acquitted on October 3rd, 1995. Wow.
And to this day, he's afraid to live in L.A. because the killer might still be there. Every time he looks in a mirror, he sees him. I've
been rewatching through South Park, and I'm in 2001 or 2002 for South Park. Like, World Trade Center stuff happened. I think I'm in 2002. Like the South Park season that came out.
What season are you on?
Oh God, I want to say 7 or 8.
Oh really?
Because I've just been rewatching through all of them, and it's so interesting to watch South Park in the context of history and not just entertainment,
and watch it like evolve.
Exactly, because the political commentary it takes is. I mean, it's very interesting from season to season, like, including modern day. The COVID stuff always interested me. But, like, to watch it with the first 2 seasons coming out in 96, 97, and they had a movie in 99, the stuff that they make fun of in 96 and 97 is so, like... Some of the stuff is outdated, like Barbra Streisand.
Yeah, I honestly, like, I really love the first 2 seasons because they're just so...
Well, I've started to hate the first season a lot because
there's like
very repetitive.
Yeah.
The first season...
I like how... I don't know what the word is. It's like, I like how kind of like just ramshackle it looks. It has a charm to it.
It does.
And like the low production quality, I don't know why. I really like it.
And just like the political commentary of the time, the stuff that they do making fun of Clinton and O.J. Simpson and just all of that, all of the scandals that were happening in the 90s at the time is so I don't know, knowing the history of the 90s and just knowing the history, or at least a decent amount of history of America, it's so interesting to actually start watching political commentaries from those time periods. Like Ronald Reagan, when he would go up and give speeches about Gorbachev and the Russians, and he would tell jokes to the people, and it's like, it's still funny to me because of the way that he tells it. He's a really...
Yeah, or even like in The Simpsons when they would do it too.
Yeah, when The Simpsons did it, I just... Oh, no. So before coming here, I was eating dinner and naturally watching South Park because eventually I like to go through old shows that I watched, and I just watched the episode Simpsons Did It, or Simpsons already did that, or something like that, and it's just, there's one part for 20 seconds where a character's just like, Simpsons did it, Simpsons did it, Simpsons did it, and Simpsons did it, man. I don't know what else to say besides.
I mean, at this point, they've literally done everything, and probably again.
Yeah.
Because you just, like, how are they still on the air? Just like 30 seasons.
I will say, I watched it when I was younger, and
I watched a lot of, like, season 5 of The Simpsons when I was little, because that was one of the only seasons we had on DVD. So I remember, like, the one where they make fun of the Beatles parody one with the barbershop quartet. I remember the one where he goes to space, and where Marge, like, meets up with, like, I think it's, like, their neighbor or something, and they go on the run and stuff like that. Just a lot of just, like, when they started to get a little more, like, outlandish kind of, and I'm just like, it's like, I like this. But, like, those are the ones I remember the most.
Oh, The Simpsons. What a series. They're like Russia.
They used to be really good. Like, the early ones are like, I don't know what people say. Like, people always say, like, oh, like the seasons 2 through 9 or 8 or something, or 7, or I don't know what it is. I don't care. But I just, like I said, most of my Simpsons knowing about just kind of starts and stops with season 5, because that's the only one I really watched consistently. Because that's all, because, you know, that's all I had on DVD.
Oh, DVD. Oh, my God.
I think I still have it somewhere, but it's definitely unwatchable, because as a young child, you abuse every DVD that you owned, and then you find it years later, and you're like, well, this is unplayable.
Well, you find it years later, and you go, wait a minute. What is a DVD? I don't even have a DVD player. Like, I use my PlayStation or my Xbox as a DVD player because I just don't own those anymore. And if I have DVDs...
I still have the DVD player that's in my living room when I was, like, a kid.
Yikes.
It's in my room, but I don't use it. I just...
Yeah, there's no reason to. Like...
Sometimes, we have a DVD player in the living room, like, at least at my dad's, but that's because, like, there's some movies you can't watch anywhere on streaming, and we only have them on DVD. Like,
fair.
Like The Godfather and Purple Rain.
Give it 20 years and see what happens to DVDs.
Oh, they'll be gone.
Yeah. So, Nicole Brown and O.J. Simpson. Yep. So, moving on. Bill Clinton signs the assault weapons ban, which bars the use of assault weapons for 10 years. For the first time since 1904, the World Series of Major League Baseball is canceled.
What for?
It is due to a players' strike begun in August by the Major League Baseball Players Association.
Huh.
Let me double-check something.
Also in 1994, we have the death of Kurt Cobain.
Yes.
I'm not a too big a Nirvana fan, though.
But it's still kind of,
That is a big event, though. I will admit that is, that does. I mean, like I said, I'm
not a big Nirvana fan either. But
I didn't really listen to them growing up. But he was a pretty, Kurt Cobain is a pretty smart guy. I mean, like, I've seen like interviews with him. He's an intelligent dude. Really like just kind of a nice dude, humble guy, and he showed a lot of promise as an artist. And I would have honestly, there was a point where I would have said a lot of string of nasty things about Nirvana. I used to really not like Nirvana.
Oof.
Yeah, but I've softened on them. I mean, like, I don't think they're the greatest band ever made. Because a lot of people really love them. I just don't, because I don't really have that connection to them like that. But I mean, they had a big impact. I can acknowledge that. I've grown enough and matured enough to realize that. And,
I will say
I actually do like some of their songs, but they are, they made their mark.
They made their mark, but like, if they come on the radio, if I'm even listening to the radio, they definitely end up getting skipped.
Yeah, sometimes, because most of the stuff they play on the radio isn't that good.
Smells Like Teen Spirit over and over and over and over and over again.
I mean, I only like hearing that song if the last time I heard it was like a while ago, because I don't hear it very much now, because I don't listen to the radio like at all. But sometimes I'll hear someone play it. Like, I'll be at work and someone will play it on their speaker, and I'll be like, oh yeah, there it is. There's Nirvana again. Hello, old friend.
So, 1994, I've got like 2 or 3 more things that we can wrap up on, which are going to be, yeah. So, 1994, keep in mind in 92, Bill Clinton gets elected. He beats the Republicans, and he's in there as a Democrat. Well, 96, you have another election, and in 94, the Republicans are going back and forth with each other. Here's what this says. The Republican Revolution concludes with the midterm elections when, for the first time in 40 years, the party gains control of both the Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives. So basically, you're starting to see the Republicans unite a bit, and eventually this is where you see, Bush, and everything that happens eventually from 96 onward. But we'll get into that. We're starting to see the rise of the Republicans to step in during 9/11. So here's 2. We'll end. Actually, I guess we'll end on a sad note. But American figure skater, and they made a movie about this recently, I'm sure everyone knows about this. Nancy Kerrigan is clubbed in the knee 1 month before the Winter Olympics. It was later discovered that you don't know this?
No, what?
Oh. It was later discovered that the attack was organized by associates of rival skater Tonya Harding. Despite her injury, Kerrigan still went on to win the silver medal at the Olympics in Lillehammer, Norway. Norwegians. Yeah, didn't hear about that?
No, I never heard about that. Are you serious?
Uh-huh. What was the movie that just came out?
For the Olympics?
Uh-huh.
You know what I found out?
Yeah, I, Tonya, 2017. Oh, my God, 2017. Yeah.
I once learned about the Olympics recently that really opened my eyes. Because for a long time, I was like, oh, the Olympics, that's like the pinnacle of, like, athleticism. You got all the best athletes in the world. And then I found out that, like, professional athletes, like, let's say you're, like, in the, NBA or something, or MLB, you make so much more money as that than on the Olympics, because they don't pay you anything for the Olympics. They pay you like a few $1,000s or something like that. And I'm like,
really?
Yeah. I mean, somebody told me that, but I'm like, it kind of makes sense because it costs so much money to just do the Olympics in general that most countries that host them, they go into like financial like trouble afterward. Like, I think like in Rio, like even when they were like just even trying to get it together and set it up, like they had a lot of trouble with it and stuff, and there's like a bunch of controversy. They're trying to like, I don't know what they would do, but like there was a lot of weird stuff that was going on. And then like afterward it was like, yeah, it's like, almost always the Olympic villages fall into ruin and stuff like that. And like, and it's just, I don't know why people do it. It's not financially worth it. They build all this infrastructure and then they don't use it. And I'm like, when will you learn? It's good for tourism though, because a lot of people want to go see the Olympics.
Sorry, I'm going down the rabbit hole. I need to stop. Yeah, the movie came out, I, Tonya, in 2017. And if I remember correctly, it had a whole bunch of controversy for like portraying Tonya
as the bad guy.
as the good guy.
What?
Because Nancy Kerrigan was the one who got her kneecap busted by this Russian, played by Margot Robbie in the movie. Now, don't quote me on this because I was 17 at the time. I was still in high school when this came out, and I was like, this looks stupid. I don't have any interest in this. And
I never even heard of it.
Yeah. Well, so it's on Hulu with the subscription, so I might end up just this weekend watching it because I'm curious to see the movie.
Honestly, I'm curious just to find out, like, what happened.
She got her kneecap busted in. It ruined her career.
That is so weird and petty to do. Like,
yeah.
It's like, come on, man.
Honestly, that's another thing.
Like, was she that good that this person had to be like, I need this person to be taken care of?
Yeah. It's messed up.
I would have to see her perform, pre-kneecap busting, because this person must have been a real, like, monster at skating. For this other person to be like, to have somebody do that to them. I can't fathom it. It's so weird.
I don't know. I need to watch the movie on that too and read up on the story and learn a little bit more about it. But I got
some homework to do.
So next we'll get into something nice, and then I'll give you a little bit of a teaser for next time. In the first South African election in which black people are allowed to vote, Nelson Mandela is elected president, and he is the first black South African president. So, 27 years in prison, gets out of prison at the beginning of this episode that we talked about, 1990, and eventually becomes president in 1994. So
that's awesome. It's from the bottom to the top. That's great. I love that.
So here's a fun little teaser trailer for next time, since as always we're actually going to end early but later than I had anticipated. 1995. This is where next episode is going to start. 170. That's not right. I'm already wrong. There we go. Anarchists Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, for our people who listen, our people who lived this history or studied this history. I'm sure you probably know. April 19th, 1995, two anarchists explode a bomb outside the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people in a domestic terrorism attack. We're going to get into that next time, and basically we're going to begin with that bombing. But that's next time. That's next week.
That's a story for another day.
That's right. You've been listening to 97.5 I can't talk tonight. 97.5 WOPN, The Wild Card. This is Retrospection Radio Hour. We film this from 8 to 10 p.m. on Fridays. Honestly, it changes. It keeps changing per semester of college, and soon I'll be out of college, so we can find a better time and a better setup, since we could honestly just do this at my apartment. I've got it set up to be able to do this once I leave college. But yeah, Retrospection Radio Hour. Don't forget the second episode of Retrospection Radio Theater. Season 4, The Madison Maimer, is coming out on the 1st of January, or the 31st of January, 2022. I'm having a rough night tonight, I think moving to the evening was maybe not the best idea on my end. And, of course, we're starting up live streams called Retrospection Radio Live. If you are an author, a celebrity, somebody who owns something, or honestly just has an interesting story to tell, it doesn't matter if you're a famous person or not. If you have an interesting story to tell, I would love to hear about it and maybe even have you live on the show at Retrospection, or send an email to retrospectionradio@gmail.com, or just contact us through any of the social medias or anything like that, because honestly, I'd love to hear about you and your story. So feel free to reach out there. This has been Retrospection Radio Hour. I said that a million times now. I'm Noah.
And I am Nate.
We're gonna go ahead and throw you back onto the radio.